The journey of the divine feminine's evolution is both cosmic and embodied. It is a death and rebirth into illumination. But it is not a linear journey. It is not the hero's journey. It is a spiral journey, the heroine's journey of descent and rebirth and ultimately ascension, very much symbolized by the rose, which is the symbol of the awakened heart. So, in this transmission, we are going to dive deep into the journey of descending through the gates of initiation and stepping through the solar thresholds. So, I've decided to include this transmission as both an episode on the Heart of Truth podcast, as well as the intended video five for, or six rather, for the Divine Feminine Awakening series, because I feel that this is such a potent moment in the collective evolution of consciousness that many are awakening, men, masculines included, to the feminine energy, the feminine essence. There is a great deal of reclamation and restoration of our connection with the mother. And this is occurring with both men and women and everyone, right? We all embody both masculine and feminine energetics. And there is so much to be said. Plus, this is very much a personal journey of mine. So I am going to include some of my own personal journey in this transmission. So it's going to be a little bit of a longer one, but it's really so potent and so timely right now. So we're going to look at Venus, Inanna, and the solar thresholds of the divine feminine. And we're going to restore the essence, the true essence of the archetype, because I do believe that there have been a lot of, we can even say, egregores created out of these mythological archetypes. But within the myth, within the archetype, there is such profound, potent wisdom. So when we go on this journey of purification, we can reclaim the aspects of the mythology, because Ishtar and Inanna have been really associated with a lot of distortion, we could say, and a lot of lunar consciousness. So, as we go through our own journeys, we purify our vessels of the distortion and we return to a place of reclamation in many cases. And this is very much what the journey of Inanna's descent itself symbolizes, as well as the movement of Venus through the sky. So, we're going to look at the Venus rose gates and Inanna's descent. And because it does perfectly mirror the journey from lunar to solar consciousness. So it's really quite beautiful and magical when we go through this journey ourselves and reclaim the aspects that we may have rejected because of the original distortions that were placed over them, the overlays placed over our perception of Ishtar, for example. So, we're going to look more deeply at how this journey really reflects the feminine initiation, her descent through the gates, what that reflects for our own journeys of ego death and initiation. It very much is a shift from lunar reflection to solar embodiment. So, the reflection energy, the moon as a mirror, as a reflection of the solar light. So, this is very much that lunar consciousness of the mystery and the shadow. And yes, there's that intuition of descending into the cave, into the darkness to reclaim the aspects of self. But the purpose is to then ascend, to exit the darkness, to exit the cave, and step into sovereign embodiment, illumination, and wholeness, and really, truly radiance as the solar embodiment of this essence. So the true divine feminine is solar in nature. And this is why so many of the priestess teachings and the mystery school teachings contain distortion, is because they remain rooted in the shadows of lunar consciousness rather than evolving and ascending into the solar embodiment. So it's not that anything is wrong with the lunar teachings in their pure form. It's about how we move through them. Are we moving through the thresholds or remaining stagnant in a place that we were never meant to remain, in the shadows, in the darkness? So the myth of Inanna and Ishtar, they are more or less one and the same, Babylonia and Mesopotamia. And yes, there are distortions and overlays over them. I fully acknowledge that. But this journey is one of descending through the seven gates into the underworld, the seven gates mirroring, yes, the seven chakras. So it's very much that descent through the chakras to clear out the ego overlays, the distortions, the traumas, the wounds, the aspects of self that keep us rooted in separation. And I'll get into some of my personal experiences later, but I would like to share off the bat that I have a soft spot and deep connection with Inanna in her pure archetypal form because she is the first goddess that came to me when I was being initiated onto this path. And I didn't know much about the divine feminine. I was in an embodied ascension training and I was going deeper into the awakening journey, but I had not yet embarked on the full on priestess or rose path or the feminine awakening aspect. So, in a channeling session, Ishtar Inanna and the pink rose came through for me. And then within days, roses started showing up in my physical reality everywhere. And that weekend, just a couple days later, my roommate at the time brought home a massive bouquet of 100 roses. And guess what color they were? Pink. It was from an event that she had worked at. And I was like, okay, I cannot ignore this incredible synchronicity. This is a massive, impossible to ignore sign and synchronicity. Okay, I'm listening, right? So, roses are a symbol of Venus, which we will get into in a little bit, but Inanna is the original Venus archetype. She is known as the Queen of Heaven and Earth. So, she represents the supreme wisdom of the sacred feminine. She is the embodiment of Venus, the queen of heaven and earth, the mother of earth. So she holds many codes similar to other goddesses. However, she is the original that has moved through myth and symbolism through the eons, through the ages, and her myth and symbolism contain eternal principles in their purified form. And it is no surprise, actually, that there has been a great deal of distortion and overlay placed over both her as a symbol, as an archetype, as a goddess, and her myth itself. There are multiple versions, and some of them are a little dark, but I like to look at the core essence of her journey, less so the details, but more the essence of what it symbolizes, because it really is about a queen reclaiming her power, reclaiming her throne after she descends into darkness to become embodied in her wholeness and return in the frequency of illumination. So much like the feminine herself has been hidden, her mythos and her story has essentially been hidden in the shadows until we were ready to receive the illumination of the truth, of the true divine feminine, of the true sacred feminine. So her journey is one of embodied initiation, dying to become reborn again, letting go of the trappings of the ego, what we might have once held dear, even to endure a path to be born again. So essentially, it is truly the ego death. And I was talking about the ego death in the last Heart of Truth podcast episode, but she really embodies and symbolizes a powerful shift in consciousness and this greater spiritual awakening, the essence of her true self being born and rising once again. So the ego death is, of course, what leads us to our higher self. And here she is, a queen resurrecting to reclaim her throne whole and holy. So she journeys down into the underworld to meet her shadow, which is symbolized by her sister Erishkigal, her twin sister Erishkigal, who is the queen of the underworld. So her journey is very much symbolic of fragmentation, ego death, and the stripping of identity, because at each gate, each of the seven gates she must descend through in order to meet her sister, there is an initiation that is kind of like humility, but it is surrender and a reclamation of essence. But of course, humility is the humbling. And I was speaking in the last episode of the great humbling that I feel so many are going through. So many are experiencing this ego death, but ego death as a great humbling. So her journey very much symbolizes this, as she has to remove her crown, her scepter, her necklace, her robes. At each gate, she has to release one of the trappings of her queenly identity, but the false trappings of the false royal archetype, of course, right? So, as she is in the underworld, she integrates and returns into this essence of wholeness. And her ascent is truly one of rebirth into embodiment, to radiate from within. And this is the power of descent, symbolized by both the feminine as well as the season that we are in, the descending darkness into the season of Samhain, approaching winter solstice, the nights getting longer, the days getting shorter. And we are in Scorpio season according to the tropical zodiac, which I associate with the ego itself. So Scorpio is that essence of alchemy, but it's this idea of the poison of the scorpion also being the medicine, that through alchemy we can transmute the pain into power, the wound into wisdom, the victimhood into victory, loss into love, right? All of these different aspects of transmutation coming to the fore. This is alchemy in action. This is inner alchemy. And this is what the journey of the feminine represents. And this is what the Venus rose gates represent for us. They create this celestial blueprint for the feminine awakening and for the feminine aspect of all beings to reawaken and be integrated into wholeness. So let's get deeper into Venus itself as the symbol of the divine feminine. So the astronomical Venus cycle, it creates a pentagram in the sky over the course of 8 years. It creates a literal rose pattern in the sky, a beautiful sacred geometry. This is called the path of Venus. So the rose, again, is a symbol of the awakened heart, and Venus represents beauty, love, abundance, fertility, relationship harmony. Associated with Taurus and Libra, she is associated with 2, and they're both very interesting archetypes, but very embodied, very balanced, very harmonized. The relational aspect, as well as the embodiment aspect, the embodiment of the frequencies of the divine feminine being abundance and love and pleasure and sensuality. So this is why so many on the path of the divine feminine are connecting with the essence of Venus, but also the essence of the rose itself. And then we have Inanna, the embodiment of Venus, symbolized by the eight-pointed star of Venus, the center of which is represented by the number nine. Nine being the frequency of the divine feminine, according to some, as the Venus synodic cycle is comprised of about 9 months. So 9 months as the morning star, 9 months as the evening star. In between, she disappears behind the sun. So it's basically her location in the sky relative to the earth. So when she's behind the sun, she descends into darkness, much like Inanna descending into the underworld. And so the morning star and the evening star phases representing her descent and ascent. So, five of these cycles of the 9 month descent and the 9 month ascent, each creating a petal. And these five petals create the Venus rose. This is known as her synodic cycle. So, this very much parallels also the myth of Persephone, who descends into the underworld during the winter season. So, the descent and the ascent phases are mirrored in multiple goddess myths, but specifically Inanna's myth is very much mirrored in this Venus movement through the sky. This is the feminine alchemy of death and rebirth, descending into the underworld to reclaim her wholeness and ascend radiant and illuminated by her solar remembrance. So Venus has a connection to both the moon and the sun, which is why she very intimately embodies and reflects to us who we are at a core level. She bridges the two, carrying this lunar depth into solar illumination. And so, again, this is where we've got to integrate into wholeness the light and the shadow. The shadow creates a fuller spectrum of light. If we do not descend into the darkness, the light itself is an empty light, devoid of the radiant illumination of the full spectrum of color. I look at it as an empty light versus a diamond light shimmering like a rainbow. And so this is how we become the diamond, by descending into the underworld, into the darkness, like the coal being formed into the diamond itself. So those who hold particular codes may feel resonant with the rose priestess path, the rose lineage, the blue rose lineage, and Venus is very much associated with this journey, and therefore Inanna very much is a symbolic archetypal embodiment of the journey that we go on through the gates, which is essentially through the chakras. So let's get deeper into the gates and the chakras. So Inanna, in her mythology, passes through the seven gates of initiation. We can liken this to the seven gates of hell, the seven deadly sins, the seven wraths, even. At each gate, she is stripped down, and this stripping down represents the stripping of the ego, the earthly, false material persona, false attachments, a sense of false self-identification. So we can look at this as pride, avarice, luxury, wrath, gluttony, envy, and sloth. Of course. As she descends, she is removed of her status, basically. She is removed of her status, her pride, her queendom. She is reduced to nothingness because as she walks through the threshold of the final gate, she is completely stripped bare, walking naked into the underworld. She stands there naked, vulnerable, utterly exposed, and I think many people can resonate with this feeling in the ego death, that great humbling that so many of us have experienced. We feel vulnerable, we feel exposed, even if it's being exposed to our own consciousness. It's an incredibly vulnerable feeling to feel stripped naked of who you thought you were. And in the underworld, Inanna meets her twin sister, who's also her nemesis, her opposite, Ereshkigal. She is jealous, wrathful even at points, envious. But you also have a lot of compassion for Ereshkigal, who must be jealous of her sister, who is the queen of heaven and earth, while she is stuck being the queen of the underworld, right? So this is symbolic of confronting the shadow self, the dark, aspects to our light. And when we can get comfortable with those aspects, when we can face them and embrace them, then we become the fullness of who we are. So after her descent, she spends 3 days dead in the underworld, after which she is then revived and resurrected. Does this sound somewhat familiar? So, the original resurrection mysteries are actually rooted in the feminine consciousness, the feminine archetype, which is why many say that it was only through Mary Magdalene's womb that Yeshua was able to attain his resurrection body. And this 3 days, of course, represents the Holy Trinity and the deeply symbolic trinities on this journey, beginning, middle, end, masculine, feminine, holy child. The holy child that is birthed from merging the masculine and feminine into wholeness. So part of the remembrance occurring right now as the divine feminine is being restored and resurrected is that within the union, the divine union template, it creates not one, but it creates three. When the two merge, it doesn't create one, it creates three, because you have the aspect of the third that is created, the relationship template itself, the holy child, if you will. So essentially, in order for Inanna to return to the light as the embodied queen of heaven and earth, as the embodied sacred feminine, she had to release all aspects of self rooted in distortion, that the light that she had dimmed or distorted to fit the trappings of falsity that caused her to play small, the aspects of self that were lacking true love and the love of life itself, the joy of life itself. So her journey through the gates is really a journey into inner union, the hero or heroine's journey to return to balance and harmony within as the feminine principle rises to meet the masculine. And I'd like to share a quotation from the Gospel of Philip. Light and darkness, life and death, right and left are inseparable twins. Those who transcend these apparent opposites are eternal beings. And this is very much what her journey represents, that journey into wholeness, into inner union. As within, so without, we must each reach that state of inner union in order to ascend our frequency and our consciousness to become the embodiment of the light that is being anchored onto earth now to create heaven and earth, to usher in this new golden age of humanity. It is through the sacred marriage within that we can anchor the blueprint for heaven on earth, as within, so without. So at the final gate of her ascent from the underworld, Inanna, the queen of heaven and earth, reclaims her crown, and this represents the reclamation of sovereignty, of inner authority, and human divinity. She's basically showing us the way, and the way is to first descend in order to reclaim. So at the start of her journey, of her life, Inanna is the young, naive, curious maiden, and this was at the time of the patriarchal takeover, mind you. So she really is ushering us through this sacred feminine reclamation, but she had to be hidden herself, right? The divine feminine had to be hidden and suppressed. This very much is representative of what I personally have gone through, and I believe this is why that she came through in my first channeling session, because I actually and I just shared this in a post recently. It's not something I've discussed at great length publicly, but soon after she came into my field, I was told in a ceremony that I had an ancient ancestral curse that the shaman who was holding the space was not able to get. I had to go do a private ceremony with his master shaman. So in that ceremony, that first ceremony, it was intense, and darkness came out and attacked everybody in the room but me. So it turned out she was actually protecting me. And through the darkness, the shaman was able to see this incredibly beautiful iridescent essence, but it was hidden under a shroud of darkness, of dark fog, even. And he was not able to complete the ceremony at that time. But I did return 4 years ago, almost exactly at this time of year, and he was able to complete the ceremony. And then he shared that she wished for me to go under and meet her. And she was pure black, pure velvety, soft, feminine, warm energy flowing like a velvet and silk underwater is the best way that I can explain what I saw and what I felt. She was warm, motherly, inviting, but she was pure black. I did see a beautiful face in the blackness. And what I felt was this restoration of the dark feminine, of the darkness, the primordial void space from which all creation is birthed, but the dark feminine has become distorted. The underworld essence has become distorted. And so I had this curse placed on my womb as a form of protection to suppress my magic, to cloak my essence from the patriarchy, is essentially what the message was. So I very much feel this mirroring of Inanna, of the feminine collective as well, particularly those who have incarnated in the past as priestesses, healers, oracles, to be hidden under the guise, under the cloak of darkness, that moon consciousness then taking over, right? Which created layers of distortion. But it was also a form of protection so that our codes, that our grail codes could be protected and preserved over time so they would not be lost. And they could be resurrected when the time was right, and that time is now. So now we are returning the feminine to consciousness. This is the awakening of Sleeping Beauty, just came to mind. So from the maiden, she then enters the marriage bed of her king, Dumuzi, and he is the god of fertility. So he is the plower of her fields. Her garden is the womb, right? So this is very symbolic of the essence of creation, that motherhood energy, the power of her sovereignty and virginity in its original definition, whole and holy unto herself, coming into sacred union. And yet there was distortion in the story itself. So her descent represents also the crone stage of the feminine, this embodiment of wisdom, of deep empowered wisdom. So there are different versions of the story. At the gates, she leaves slightly different items depending on the version of the story, but according to the first, it's always the crown at the crown chakra, of course, but then earrings, a six-pointed necklace, a starry cloak. Starry cloak is interesting. That's a nod to Mother Mary, right? Her wrist and ankle bangles, her diamond belt, her skirt, her robes fall at the seventh, and then she enters the eighth level, the throne room, naked. And this is where she experiences judgment. The hidden away aspects of self are ready to be seen at this point. So it's the dying of the old self. Well, how interesting is that? Precisely as I say, dying to the old self, my little ring light goes out. Descending into the darkness, into the underworld, right? This is where Inanna stays for 3 days and 3 nights, hanging on a hook, reminiscent of a cross, right? So this is what many people believe to be the original resurrection story, that all of the myths and mythos and the heroes' journeys originate in just a few stories, this being one of the actual originals, that Christ's story is actually mirrored off of Inanna's. Are there actual embodiments that have incarnated carrying these same archetypal energies for different purposes, for similar purposes at different points in time of humanity's evolution? That's very possible. I do believe it's very possible there was a genuine embodiment of Yeshua, Jesus the Christ, carrying these codes. It's also a frequency of consciousness that is embodied by ascended masters. So Jesus himself, Yeshua, was trained by druids. He was trained in the ancient mystery schools of Egypt. He was trained in India. So, when we look at this from an archetypal perspective, we can also see that this is the journey we are all meant to go on. And so, it also makes sense that multiple beings will have incarnated with the same energies and archetypal essences that they're meant to embody and show to humanity. This is the path forward, right? So whether you take it as pure myth and symbolism or see these beings as embodied archetypal representatives to anchor these codes into Earth is entirely up to you, honestly. That does not change the essence of the message itself, in my humble opinion. Whether or not they were incarnated beings in physical form is almost irrelevant to the lesson itself. So, these cycles of death and rebirth are the shedding of the serpent skin. This is part of the reason the serpent originally is associated with the divine feminine. Yes, the Kundalini Shakti energy, but also this essence of shedding the old to create space for the new. We confront the deep corners, the dark aspects of our psyche to lose all that is illusion and not truth. And then we allow space for that truth to be illuminated. So the embodiment aspect is the truest expression of self being integrated, the integration of the ego and the soul coming together. So Inanna embodies both the warrior and the lover, the thorns and the petals, all the duality and complexity of what it means to be human. She is symbolized by both the lion and the dove as well, reminiscent of the masculine Christ frequency and the feminine Holy Spirit dove energy, the Holy Mother. So she is the embodiment of wholeness. And embodiment is the key to healing and creation itself. So Venus in her ascent calls on us to reclaim our gifts and our voices, to come into a frequency of truth, love, and inner harmony and union. And I think it's worth noting that Venus is seen by many to be the twin planet of the Earth. So to ascend, we have to be initiated through Venus. So there's this kind of shamanistic aspect to the astrology. It's about learning how to love, how to grow, how to evolve through love itself. So touching now on the lunar mysteries, the moon consciousness, the lunar consciousness connected with the priestess lineages. So the moon was meant to be an ancient teacher of cycles, of tides, of transformation, the feminine aspect that is intuitive, reflective, and receptive. So really, this is the aspect that is the keeper of hidden wisdom. And priestess lineages of, going way back, Avalon, the Rose lineages, a lot of them were very lunar based. There was the lunar based sacred feminine initiation. However, a lot of this fell into lunar distortion as there was over identification with the shadow, with the darkness, with being hidden, right? Hidden beneath the veil, hidden behind the veil. Emotional cycles as well, and this dependency on reflected light rather than the true radiant ultraviolet light of the sun, the ultraviolet light that contains the full spectrum of light, not the reflection, the mirror of true light. So this is where the distortions were inserted, and women had to be hidden under the night. They would gather under the full moon in secret circles at certain phases of their evolution, right? Because it wasn't safe to do so otherwise. But now, I feel it is time for us to step into illumination, to radiate the solar essence we are meant to embody, to ascend out of the cave, out of the hidden depths of darkness, to reclaim our gifts, to reclaim our voice, to reclaim our crowns. This is not out of ego. This is not out of overcoming the masculine, taking over from a place of ego based authority, this power over energy, this dominance energy. But this is about emerging integrated, whole, embodied in the frequency of love and reclaiming the mysteries, bringing the hidden secrets out into the light to illuminate not just ourselves, but the truth of what the feminine essence contains, what the sacred feminine essence has to give to the world, the power of creation itself, the power of love. So, the feminine collective is currently going through an initiation into solar embodiment, and my light is charged up enough again that the light is illuminating me as I get to speak into this aspect of the journey. We are no longer reflecting masculine light or the distorted lunar light, but we are emanating our own light. She, the feminine, is meant to embody her radiance. The solar feminine is illuminated sovereignty, radiance, coherence, truth. This is the frequency she holds. The Holy Mother is the cosmic womb of creation, the source of both lunar and solar expressions. So this rebirth marks the return of the Christ Sophia codes onto earth, not just Christ's consciousness, but Christ Sophia, the Christos Sophia. So our hearts are our inner compass. We are meant to descend into the heart, into the womb, to access those codes, those codes that contain deep, potent wisdom, but then to share and express them out into the world, to actually give birth to the creations. So we are here to heal our wombs and reclaim our voices as we descend into the heart of darkness, which is really the heart of truth that contains the treasure, to reclaim the gifts, the codes, the keys. Because the truth is, until you know the darkness of Sophia, you will not acquire her light. You must die and be reborn of the Mother Spirit in order to access the knowledge of the resurrection itself. The resurrection of the Christ body is to embody the frequencies of Christ consciousness within. So again, Christ consciousness cannot come until the divine feminine is reinstated, until there is balance. This is what will bring the world awakening, as I have said previously in this divine feminine awakening series. So I will share again this quotation from the Gospel of Mary. The light entered, but it was too bright. And so now the fire comes to purify, so that all might be sanctified to receive the true light. Everything shall be accomplished in due season, and it is the Mother Spirit that will accomplish everything. I myself on this journey feel like I have gone through 1,000 mini deaths and rebirths, some of them not so many. And every time I emerge from the depths, I feel more anchored in myself, like more aspects of my higher self have been reclaimed and embodied. As I always say, the deeper you dive, the higher you rise. The higher you rise in frequency, the higher you rise in embodiment. So remember that the descent and ascent is a cyclical process. It's a cyclical journey. It's a spiral journey. It is not a one-time event. The way that I look at it is each time we come round the back end, we get to learn the lesson in a more deep, integrated manner. And as we spiral up the journey, we get closer and closer to becoming the pillar of light. Because this is the purpose of the entire journey, is to become the living bridge between heaven and earth, the light and the shadow, the lunar and the solar, the heart becoming one in divine union. This is the restoration of the crystal heart, of the Christed heart. I'm sure there's a great deal more I could share about my own personal journey, but I'm going to leave it here for today. But I would love to hear in the comments from you how this has resonated. If you have experienced this descent into the underworld, this initiation with the feminine, with the dark feminine, the holy feminine, and how Inanna's journey specifically resonates with you, how it's landing at this point in time of your own evolution. Because for a time there, I stepped away from a lot of the original teachings from my original trainings because they were still steeped in some of the lunar distortions. But now that I have purified my consciousness and understand those distortions, I'm now at the point of reclamation of the pure essence of these archetypal aspects of the divine feminine, including the ones that have become distorted and overlaid themselves. Because remember, the darkness cannot create. It can only take organic creation and invert, hijack, distort. So, all of these archetypes contain potent seeds for our own evolution. So, the call is not to reject certain aspects outright, but to purify the aspects of these archetypal embodiments, of these symbols that have become hijacked and distorted, and to return them, to restore them to their rightful original essence. This is really where I've come to personally on my journey, anyway. So, if you would like to go deeper, I have a lot of activations in my inner temple, and we do live activations at the solar thresholds of the high holy days based on the solar movements through the sky. So, the equinoxes, solstices, and the cross quarter high holy days. And I am also hosting the Cosmic Womb for those who see this before 11/11, as well as dissolving the veil on November 6th of 2025. And dissolving the veil is open to all who would like to purify, who are ready to purify their consciousness, their pineal gland of the distorted veil, the firmament, the illusions of the ego. We are going to go deep into this, and a really beautiful journey has already been planted, and it's going to be this really incredible restoration of pure coding. It's really incredibly beautiful, and that also serves as the threshold into the cosmic womb, which is a journey of womb sovereignty, womb reclamation, the reclamation of the triple flame, the restoration activation of the triple flame, as well as the throat chakra, but creating a harmonized and regulated nervous system to hold these frequencies so that we can step forward and create through the frequency of sovereignty. This is what the journey is all about. And I am so excited to be bringing this forward, a 6-week journey between solar Samhain and winter solstice. And those activations, ceremonies, transmissions are both included in this journey. And those 2 ceremonies, transmissions, activations of solar Samhain and winter solstice are available to all through the inner temple. Men, women, you are all welcome. Women for the cosmic womb. So leave it in the comments below how this has been resonating. All the likes, comments, shares, subscribes, follows are so helpful. It helps more people see my content, more people see and receive these messages. So I truly appreciate all of those who have stuck with me all the way to the end here, especially. Thank you for being on this journey with me. And I invite you to check out the rest of the Divine Feminine Awakening series if you have not already. And of course, my previous episodes on the Heart of Truth podcast if you are new here. And I believe I forgot to introduce myself. Again, I'm Amanda, an Oracle and Divine Feminine and Grail Mastery mentor. So welcome if you're new here. Welcome or welcome back. And I'm very much looking forward to future episodes as well as the upcoming videos for the Divine Feminine Awakening series. And please do share this with anybody you feel may resonate. Feel free to share all of the videos that you feel may resonate with others, your friends on this journey. And yes, I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Onward and upward in love and light as we journey home to the heart of truth. And I will see you there. Thank you for tuning in to the Heart of Truth podcast with your host, Amanda Erin Kelly. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a rating or review on your favorite platform. And if you'd like to go deeper, grab your copy of my book, Let There Be Light, and join us inside the free community in Illumina Wisdom School, where you can access free resources to jumpstart your journey, such as a higher self activation and the Body Temple Blueprint Masterclass, as well as explore the plethora of resources, including Awakening Fundamentals and Luminary, my signature path to wholeness and mastery, to help you become your own healer and sovereign authority. You can access everything at thisartcalledlife.com or find the links down in the show notes below. Until next time, onward and upward in love and light as we journey home to the heart of truth.